everyone. This is a Leadership with Heart podcast, and this is Heather Young, your host. Employee experience is powered by emotions. Managers and or leaders within organizations get to choose which emotions they unleash from within the people they lead. Leaders, meaning supervisors or above in an organization, drive much of the positive or negative emotions by their actions or inactions, their words, or what they fail to say. When a manager chooses their words and their actions carefully, they exhibit great emotional intelligence. These managers are often thought of as leaders who care, or as I like to call them, leaders with heart. This special brand of leader drives engagement and loyalty simply by being themselves. Are these leaders perfect? Absolutely not. It is in their awareness and sharing of some of their imperfections that we realize their brilliance. In this podcast, I ask you to see yourself in the stories my guests tell about times when they were not the best versions of themselves, but how they used their hearts to guide them to a place of deeper connection with their teams and heightened leadership prowess. Enjoy. Hello, everybody. This is Heather with the Leadership with Heart podcast, and I'm very excited today to have Patrick Brady on the phone with me. He is an executive at FirstBank here in Colorado regionally, and he was referred to me by the president and CEO of that bank, and I absolutely loved him on the podcast. And I asked him for someone who he thought would be at the same caliber as he was. And he took a little time to think about it and got back to me with Pat. And I'm super excited because I can tell you, I will be having Jim back on the show. It was so engaging, and I'm just super excited to have you. It's not big shoes to the extent that I know you can fill them, because he wouldn't have put your name out. So welcome on the show, Pat.
Heather, thanks for having me. I agree. They're big shoes, but I appreciate Jim's confidence in referring me to you.
So where are you right now in your leadership journey? I know I talked about FirstBank, but tell us a little bit more.
Well, you know, it's interesting. This is the only job I've had since college. So I'm 30 years into my leadership journey at FirstBank specifically. And, you know, it's always a really neat and awesome thing about FirstBank. It's pretty countercultural to the maybe business climate today, where I think, you know, we tell kids, rightfully so, that they're going to have 5 or 6 or 10 employers, and that's normal. But that's not normal at FirstBank. So anyway, it's been a blessing to be here for 30 years. You know, our whole culture is common. We have a management training program that literally Jim and all of us, all our CEOs actually over our history have started that program. So we have a real common tie and kind of a beautiful relationship and understanding to each other, because we've been through the same things together. So, it's interesting. Clearly, I feel like I'm still learning on the leadership front, although I would say I've managed people for the entire 30 years almost. And so, that sounds strange to say it sort of in that order, but so I think I've been a manager for 30 years and a leader less than that. And I am ever evolving, but I would say currently, I think what I am most excited about my current job, I'm a regional president for FirstBank, is that it gives me a new challenge in leadership, because previously I was what was called a market president, and that is a lot closer to the people, if you will, customers and those you work with as peers and maybe as their boss, which I'm really pretty natural at. I feel very natural at that kind of leadership. But my current job is a bit more removed from the people, if you will. I interact with less people in a less face-to-face personal way. And so that's been a challenge for me, because, to scale what some people might call kind of a big open personality into a more meeting-based, phone-based, video conference-based sort of management has been interesting and challenging, but challenging in a good way. And I've been at that about 2 or 3 years now. And so that's kind of a little bit about my leadership journey currently.
Wow. So you really, we talk about remote workers all the time, really just how do you establish those relationships from a distance for those who, are under your charge. And so it sounds like that's kind of your mainstream now for the last few years. And I definitely know there are challenges there, but it sounds like what I know about you already, I'm sure you're managing through that, but it can be challenging for somebody who is that natural relationship connector type person who likes to be in front of and kind of have that sensory experience with the people you lead. So I can definitely see there might be some challenges there.
Yeah, but I think it's been fun. I mean, so almost 17 years prior to that, I was a market president with, for the most part, face-to-face, in-person contact in northern Colorado, the towns and markets up there. But this is different. I'm at our headquarters more often. And my market presidents that have my previous role that I interact with are anywhere from California and all across northern Colorado. So I can't obviously be standing with them and their teams on a regular basis. So yeah, no, it's been good to figure out how to adjust after, really maybe a long period of somewhat leadership comfort.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think we all kind of get in that comfort zone with our teams and just with how we present ourselves out in the world, and it takes something like this. I mean, number one is faith that someone had in you to put you in that place, but at the same time, for you, a willingness for you to accept it and say, yes, I'm willing to take my leadership to another level, and it does require, because now it's like you go to the point where you start off, you're managing frontline, and then you're managing managers, and you're managing, you keep going up and up, and now you're managing the presidents. And so, it just takes a different level. Although in the end, I bet you there's some basic tenets there. So what would those market presidents say about your leadership style? I never like to ask what you say. I'd like to think, what do you think they'd say about your leadership style?
Oh, that's a fun question, actually. I think, and this would be, I think, very truthful but humbling to me in a way. But I think they appreciate my energy and goofiness, because I'm about as goofy as you get. But they would also appreciate how that sometimes offsets some things that I think a lot of folks have in business, which is a real type A driven, super organized personality. But a lot of people will struggle often more with soft skills, or letting their guard down more and things, and so I have an affinity for that, and I tend to work currently with a group of people that I would say have more of the skills that I wish I had, which are all those A skills, and, timeliness, organization, right, detail, and so I think most of the people would say we're a good team for the most part because of that. I believe they know I care, which is really good, I think. And I think, and I hope that they know that I view them as a peer, as an equal, and that I learn an awful lot from them. And so I think they feel that I'm giving good room for independent decision making and their own trial and error, and not trying to be kind of over the top or over management. So I believe they would say that, and I hope they say that, because that's how I'm attempting to manage, with a lot of trust and a lot of energy, and being myself, a lot of genuineness, because I am about as goofy as they come.
I love that. Well, again, for me to ask for Jim to think of someone and for him to be thoughtful enough to bring you up, obviously it means he knows that I'm looking for those who are more emotionally intelligent, and that's exactly what you're saying. I mean, in the end, your people have to first and foremost know that you care. So you have to care first, and they need to know that you care, because then anything that flows from that, they're knowing then that it's coming from the right place. Right? It's not like I'm just so self-centered, or it's all about me, or I'm trying to save my hiney. In this case, when they know you care, and you've taken that time to build a relationship with them, now again, just any decisions you make or any direction you give, they know it's not just out of thin air, that you've thought about them.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't remember if you knew John Eichert, who was the CEO before Jim. Did you know John at all?
No.
John's a great guy, right? Ran the company for almost a couple decades. But one time I told him that my management philosophy was embrace your goofiness, and he told me I needed a new philosophy. It made me laugh.
Oh,
but it's true. It's genuine for me.
Well, I think that's key, though, is that you're genuine. And what it does say to people, to the listeners, listen, you don't have to cookie cutter yourself. You don't have to look like the leader that you could emulate other people and that right, that you've seen and you thought, wow, I really like that, the way they lead that way. But I think being genuine is just the best way to go in any aspect of our lives. And so I appreciate that about you. That's awesome.
Amen. So, I would say that you encapsulated that really well.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you for just being that person too. I'm just very inspired by that. Okay, so think about it. When we think about, sometimes we lead people, and you've been leading. I mean, you started off leading people. I mean, right from your beginning journey. Most of us have a desire to lead that starts from someplace. we can think back maybe to one or two things that go, this is where my drive to lead came from. Where is your drive to lead? Where did that start from?
That's a really good question. I might take you farther back than we need to go, but I have an interesting family background. I'm the youngest of 8 kids. There are not too many people today that can say that, but and so I remember as a kid thinking, man, I love my kooky family, but I don't love everything about each person, right? And so I remember really early on, just really looking at my brothers and sisters and go, man, I like this thing, but I wouldn't really want very much of that thing, and kind of trying to select traits, that would be helpful in the world that I could latch on to, make my own or whatever, but at the same time, sort of be my own person, but learning from others. And so, I think then in my time with the bank, I've found myself, if I reflect on it, doing something similar to form my leadership style, which is looking at all the people I've worked with and for and saying, what can I learn from them, good, bad, or ugly? And, sort of tweak into my own sort of leadership style. And so, there's definitely some defining moments in my leadership path, but I remember one distinctly. I was maybe 5 years with the company, knew it was a good company. I had just had my first child of my life, so I knew I had some responsibilities in the world, but I wasn't really that motivated at work. I wasn't liking it that much, right? And didn't feel right to me. And I remember, having a review, with my bank president at the time, and he said, you know what, I'm not sure, your work and your attitude and this and that are up to snuff. And, honestly, I have grounds to maybe just ask you to leave or move on, And I looked right at him and I said, you do, because I'm not happy. And I don't know if that's you or me or the job or whatever, but I got to figure that out. And I totally get that if I don't figure that, I'll be gone. And, it's kind of weird to tell somebody, hey, part of my leadership journey is almost being fired or let go or, whatever. But it was evolutionary for me, because I'm like, well, why am I not happy? And what am I doing wrong at work? If this is the right company, if this is a good company, if these are good people, why wouldn't I be happy? And, and so when you reflect and look inside a little bit on that, I found that leader was a leader that was really different stylistically than what I've become. But I had to go, well, I don't love that style. That's my boss right now. And I need to, if I like this company, I want this job, and if I want to support my family as a banker in Fort Collins, Colorado, I better learn how to work with this person. So I went from that person saying, maybe I should let you go, you're not performing that well, to 5 years later, that person worked really hard within our internal structure and pushed it forward pretty hard to make me a president at a pretty young age. So to cover that space in 5 years and to figure that relationship out and make it productive and positive and more fun for me and more valuable for him, and, and have success together, it was a really big deal, right? And but I would have told you, the day I was having that review, I'd be gone. I can't figure out this person. I don't like this job. I'm stressed. I'm this and that. So, people's ability to change became really clear to me at that time. My ability to change, people's ability. And again, not saying something can or can't work because there's stylistic differences, but saying how can it work when there's stylistic differences, just a key point to me. And so I still think about that a lot. I just told you how I'm different from market presidents that I work with and I'm in charge of. And to me, now I say, oh, that's a really positive thing. But back then I thought that was a negative thing. When you're different, you're not the same, you don't do things the same, clearly I can't work with them, I'll be unhappy, right? So I think that was a pretty big inflection point. And that was year 5, coming up on year 30. So I keep learning off that and pivoting off that, but that was the biggest one, I think.
Interesting. Yeah, that's pretty pivotal. And actually, you bring up a really good point. I think about folks now, you hear about millennials, you'll hear about the kind of just young folks who they go in and they're like, oh, this is not working. Oops, time to move to the next place, right? Not letting things kind of baste a little bit. And I'm going to be honest, I've had that in my past, and I'm not a millennial, where I look at the person and I go, gosh, I'm not sure if their heart is in it. It seems to be more about them and not about others. And I don't think I can swallow that from day to day, to know that they're just not looking to grow me. They're not looking to, show appreciation and value. And so I start to do that in my head, and then immediately I just take myself out of the equation. And so that's why I haven't been in a place for 30 years and you have, right? That's kind of that, I think that goodness where you just said, okay, yeah, I have to evaluate. I have to decide. And there are those who do that, who stay at a place that long. And that's because they do, I think, change their mind about whatever it is that may be, to many of us, being a wedge for us to be able to move forward. And for you,
Right.
you kind of were able to evaluate and see how you could go over it and around it and create this, amazing career. So I think that's amazing. I think it's a great story, I think, for those who are listening to hear. We can learn from.
Listen, it hasn't always been easy, and it won't always be easy, but I do just think entities, today's world's a good example of it, right? Like, compromise, seeing the good in others, it's a pretty good management style if you can do it and learn from it, and sometimes be humble and sometimes be wrong. I think it's just miserable to battle all the time, and to, sort of try to build yourself up exclusively, which again, some people get to the top that way. It's just not the way I found my way getting closer to the top.
Oh, I love the fact that what this reveals, again, to people listening and to me, and this is a learning experience for all of us, is, again, it just takes all kinds. Like, I know over my career, I've thought about, gosh, how the heck did that guy get up to that spot with his ethics and his integrity, like these types of things, right? And then you have the good guys who actually make it there, and it's like, wow, that's, you took it for the team and you kept going. And I think that's just great. It just says to me that, it takes all types, and that all types are able to be promoted up. But it's just the idea of, maybe looking past some of these other things and figuring out where you can grow, how you need to grow in order to be able to, continue to move up in an organization, to be promotable. It's a big, big topic.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting part of business dynamics for sure.
So, okay, we all hear that you're absolutely wonderful, right? The goofiness, the energy, just that, lightheartedness about you. But there are those times when we, as a leader, we go, oh, I really should not have done that or said that, or, just we aren't proud of ourselves, and maybe aren't the shining example of who we are today. Can you tell us a specific example or story where you just weren't the best version of you, and what did you do to come out of that? Aside from this early career thing, something that's kind of later on when you're more senior in your role.
I can think of some stories, but, probably most recently in the last year or two, FirstBank, probably misremembering this, but when I started, it was a 300 or 400 person company. And we're approaching somewhere around 2,800 total employees, right? And there's no doubt that amount of change over time, creates a lot different company than it was back in the 1980s when I started. And so the kind of recent example of where I wasn't the best leader that I could have been was, we have some pretty senior team meetings, and, folks from all different functional areas are part of that meeting, right? And, we're talking about topics collectively that need to advance in the company on strategy and, personnel, HR, you name it, we're talking about it. But the regional president role is primarily one that's dealing with the markets, which are the bank entities, the bank branches that touch customers, right? And so we get really passionate about that, right? Because we love customers. We're used to be out in the market. We want them to have the resources they need, this, that, and the other thing, right? So there's several meetings probably in the last 12 months where, we as regional presidents, but me in particular, I take the blame for this, will kind of stir ourselves up into a frenzy, kind of get the beehive humming, and say, hey, so-and-so internal department's not doing this, and this, right? And they're terrible, and they're this, and they're that, and right? And we're doing it because we're hearing some of that up from our troops, but we're not converting it. So the thing I just said about where I kind of, said you got to appreciate different styles and convert them and figure out how to work and have relations, in this case, I was doing the opposite, where I was hearing it. I wanted to empathize with my troops. I talk to the other regionals about it. We get all stirred up and go into a meeting and, sort of blow someone up, if you will, in public, unproductively, didn't warn them, didn't give them examples what you're going to talk about in advance. You know what I mean? And
Yes.
so, not only is it unprofessional, but it's not productive, right? It's not going to make things better for the market who you're trying to help and serve, which ultimately serve the customer at FirstBank. So, and what's great though about FirstBank and how close we are and how long we've all worked together is Jim and others, in senior management, they're never shy about saying, "Hey, Brady, you know what? That doesn't follow one of our core values, which is, praise in public, right? Criticize in private. Did you go to person XYZ and let them know about these things? Did you give them a chance to work on it, right? All that kind of thing."
Mm-hmm.
So, that's something that's happened recently and happened multiple times this year in the evolution of our company from a small personal, I can pick up the phone and know and talk to anyone, to this bigger, there's systems, there's organizations, there's proper ways to do things. You got to be careful. And so, I just think that to me in the last year is something that I was disappointed perhaps in myself in as a leader, and I've worked hard to move past that and get more productive, get more positive, again, relational, build bridges, all that stuff. FirstBank's really fantastic and about giving us resources too. And so lots of us have done 360 review recently, and we've done those a number of times over the course of our career, but we're also bringing in some training expertise, which has been fun.
And the coaches
so a lot
too.
of support, coaches too,
Mm-hmm.
executive coaches. So, those are really productive things, right? To have, someone from the outside that's definitely more objective, less emotional, helping you to get better onto these things where you just slip, right? You just slip sometimes.
I love that. Well, what I appreciate about your story is many of the guests in the show, when I ask about that, they relate something from like maybe years before, so that they distance themselves from the, let's just say, imperfections.
I'm not that way now.
Right.
Yeah.
You see, I'm going like, totally not that way, like complete conversion. And I'm intelligent enough to know really that we mess up often. And we do it, every year. And it's like, so when I say come out of it, it's like coming out of that episode, coming out, what's the learning? And I appreciate that you brought it closer to home with just, up into the last year and, completely evolving and constantly being aware of, oops, I'm getting close to this. And then seeking out those active resources that allow you to, grab a hold of just some better strategies for when this happens. So like if it comes back to your plate again, you're going to have this memory stamp there and you're going to say, okay, yep, I need to be going straight to this person. I need to tell them kind of where we're at. I don't want to be having it feel like we're going behind their back. I don't want to have it where we're railroading them inside of a meeting. So I think that kind of reflection does show your kind of social emotional intelligence all the way around. Sometimes, we just don't remember it all up front. But I think once you get that memory stamp there, which it sounds like you have, it's going to be a lot less likely you're going to do that exact thing. Now, you may do another thing, right? Because again, we're not perfect.
Well, it's interesting the way you kind of described all that, because, I would say most folks that I work with and I know that are leaders are getting it 80 or 90% right? Which you would say to yourself, like, man, if you're taking a test, wouldn't you want an 80 or 90 all the time? Couldn't you live with that? But it's so crazy how disproportional the power of that off 10% can be, right? Like how bad it can break things and, how much animosity or stress it can cause. So, I think that's another reflection I'm having more recently, especially the higher you get with an organization or church or nonprofit or whatever, right? Your 10% off, it carries more and more weight the longer you're around, right? The more control you have, the more people you engage with. So, I just think it's super critical as you're maturing in your leadership journey to realize that it's almost exponential, your offage, your fall downs, and so you got to work really hard to minimize them, right? Because they're multiplied at the other end.
Wow. Yes. Ooh, that was a good one there. That was a really big nugget, because so I always say, on every episode that this is a continuous journey of improvement. We aren't seeking perfection. We're just seeking to get better every day. And it does bring what you just said, though, brings to a highlight that, okay, I'm wonderful 90% of the time, but that 10% means something to someone. We produce these emotions inside of the people we lead. And even if it impacts 3 people out of 200 or whatever that is, we have negatively impacted them in some way. And it slights our leadership by doing that. So that was just a huge nugget. That I'm hoping everybody just really takes on and based on. Again, it's not about perfection. So we have to continue to work on that 10%. So we're great and we're wonderful and we feel really confident in our space, but we still have to continue to work. So I think that's just a great point you bring up. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So because you are out, not as connected, and your people are also in their markets and they can get disconnected. And I know you do some of the videos and stuff. What are some of the other things that you do to connect with those now real, like, little senior leader people? What do you do to connect with them in a deeper way so that you kind of keep the bond there?
There's, I guess, maybe a lot of little tricks or efforts there, and especially given the geographic difference in my region with some of the out-of-state stuff. But I have an appointment every Friday afternoon on my calendar because it seems like a good way to wrap the week. I'm not always 100% loyal to it, but it literally just is a 1 hour slot that says touch base with market precedents, right? And for the most part, I'm hoping that when I do that, it's not about, hey, how you doing to your business plan? What were your numbers or metrics like this week? But it's more like, hey, how'd your week go? What are you doing this weekend? Trying to remember the kids and wives and spouses and significant others and, how are they? I remember that, your wife was interviewing for a new job. Your husband was going to do that. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
So trying to make time for that, for a personal connection, even though it's not physical connection, I think is kind of an important one. There's some neat other things we're engaging in, but one of them, I was just with my admin, exec admin this morning, and she's new working for the regional group. And so I was just explaining to her how we like to connect with our market officers or market presidents by attending meetings they have that are already set, that don't script the calendar, to just watch them together to learn, And so you got to be present still, even though you'll do a lot of this electronically. This physical presence is important. So yes. I do travel to those out-of-state markets often, and we vary it. So that's a meeting protocol. But I also schedule smaller charrettes with some of their people for breakfast or lunch in groups of somewhere from 3 to 10. So all kinds of different things, right, to connect and be personal and realize it's okay not to be on business 100% of the time, because it's interesting, all these job satisfaction surveys you read, there's so much showing that being cared for, being known personally, having a relationship is as important as comp, pay, hours, right? And so for us as leaders, in business, to miss that important piece it seems like a fatal flaw if you can't bring it back to a relational level at some point or at some regular kind of interval. So anyway, that's some of the things I do to stay connected, get connected. I also try to share personally, right? Because it's not just about asking them, right? I think some people, and I'm not sure if you've seen this in business, but when someone asks you how your weekend was, I would say 75% of the people would say it was great, and then they go to their task or whatever. Yes. I think as a leader, that's a real shortcoming and an opportunity missed when you don't say it was amazing and here's a few things I did, right? You're not bragging. You're not trying to overtake their weekend story or their, weekend coming up or whatever. But they want to know something about you too, right? I mean, they appreciate you ask about them, but they have an interest in you and your life and how that plays out and what it looks like. And so to the extent you can be real about that and share things, pretty openly, I think it only strengthens the bond too. So I do think there's a lot of people who consider themselves private. So they'll ask a lot, but they won't share a lot. And I would call that an opportunity missed to not share a fair amount about yourself.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. I think when you're saying that they're wanting to know about you, it is that they're seeking your humanness is what's happening. They're
Right.
looking for that, that just that piece of evidence that you aren't this shell of a person that dictates what they do, where they go, when they come back. That you are this person who has, the relationship that you have, the caring and all those things. And so that's what they're doing in that instance when you have an opportunity. I agree with you 100%. I think, yes, second big nugget, Pat, is this one right here. This idea of that fatal flaw of not going deeper, not building that deeper relationship that's not topical and just about work and things like that, because they need to know that you're there for them, that you care.
It's you mentioned Jim Reuter already, and just you enjoyed your time with him. But I mean, he's fantastic at a lot of what we're talking about here. But this one in particular, I mean, Jim never shy about telling a story about himself, his family, his grandkids.
Oh,
He
yeah.
has a lot of like outdoor endeavors he loves. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
he's really good. Like, I mean, I think even people that are somewhat new to the company, if they encounter Jim, I think they mostly would walk away saying, I kind of feel like I know him a little. You know what I mean? That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. It's very cool. And I agree with you 100% on that. So, okay, for the leaders that are listening, and you've given already some just really good advice, if there's something, if there's a leader that's struggling in their leadership, they might be at a crossroads, at an impasse, they're just trying to figure out, I just don't know. What might be a nugget you may leave with them? Something that just, again, you've already left two really big, impactful things, this last thing in particular, but maybe just summarizing that one nugget, the most important thing that you think you put your finger on for a leader.
Hmm. I love reading a lot, and I like reading stuff that lots of people don't like reading, which psychology, philosophy, theology. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And recently I read a book over the Christmas break kind of time, because I'd heard about this book and all kinds of other reading I'd done, but it's by Viktor Frankl, who was a psychologist from Austria, but he survived Auschwitz and other death camps, in Nazi Germany. Anyway,
Yes.
it's called Man's Search for Meaning. And so again, when all these other people are referring to his work over time, it's like I should read that book. So anyway, it's a pretty quick, short read. But I guess my reflection on like advice for leaders when they're struggling is, he's like, listen, the human mind has all kinds of interesting pathways and routing and capacities, and he said, but in his experience, like surviving a camp and seeing others who didn't, and then being trained and counseling people, before and after he was in the camp, he was just talking about that. In his opinion, there's a will for meaning, there's a will for pleasure, and there's a will for power. And in his way of thinking and in his life experience, the will for meaning should be absolutely the most important, because it's the reason people survive hard times and suffering and other things. And so, to me, what that says from a leadership standpoint is if you're doing something for the power or you're doing something for the pleasure, which might be status or pride or the pay, it's fine to have parts of it that you do for those reasons, but is it meaningful to you? Is it meaningful to your family? Is it meaningful to your community? That's what'll draw you through the kind of desert parts of your career, because right, no one gets through without having desert parts, I'm assuming, to their
Mm-hmm.
career. And so anyway, I just think that book recently was, to me, a really good reflection. Like, the meaningful is the work I do or the people I lead, is it meaningful in the world? Is it meaningful to me? And and if that's a yes, it's going to be an awful big magnet to draw you through tough times. So I don't know, that might be it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Make sure you're focused on meaning, not the other things, at least proportionally more on, is it meaningful to me, meaningful to the world, is it meaningful to the community.
Interesting thing about that is, we're all seeking to have more meaning and be basically meaningful work. The things that we're doing, is it meaningful? Is our time that we're investing, is it meaningful? And so I think that when I look at lots of employee engagement surveys and talking to employees in focus groups and things like that, that idea of meaningful work really is the thing that sticks out, because almost everything else feeds into that this idea that it feels meaningful if my manager cares for me. It feels meaningful if there's impact in the community. It feels meaningful if my organization appreciates the work I'm doing that helps to move the organization forward. There's just so many different tenets that flow right to that meaningful idea. So thank you
Yeah.
for that.
Or if they ask for input. If your employee it feels meaningful if they ask for input. One other thing I would just say, and I'm sorry, we're probably long, but as it relates to meaning is, a number of times in interviews I've had over my career, people say, well, did you always dream of being a banker? I'm like, are you ridiculous? Like, who dreams of being a banker? No, absolutely not. I still don't dream of being a banker, right? But what sometimes I think people do with their career and their leadership is like, they assume or they somehow say, well, it has to be your end all, your be all, you know what I mean? And to me, sometimes we forget that great companies, great jobs, are vehicles, like, because the meaning might be coming from your family, right? Like, I have a family to support. I love to travel and it enthuses me, right? So to me, the meaning can be outside the work as long as you do a great job in your work, in your career, in your leadership, driven by the meaning. Like, so I'm always careful to tell people that work for me, like, your meaning doesn't have to be FirstBank. Your meaning can be outside FirstBank, but FirstBank is the most fantastic vehicle to get there on your trip. So it automatically kind of by relationship makes FirstBank meaningful. So I don't know. That's kind of the way I think.
Oh, it makes me think of my interview a couple podcasts ago with Judith Simone, who is the director of talent management for Google. And she talked about helping your people pursue their own personal mission inside the work that they do, so that it could be something that relates to something external. So I think you just brought this point back home, and I think it's a very valid one, and it's becoming more prominent, I think, too, with that younger generation. So very good point to make. I'm glad that you made it right at the end, too. That's awesome. Well, this has been great, Pat. I mean, it's very fulfilling to me. I learned quite a bit, some really big nuggets, and I'm going to have to just ponder for a little bit here. So for those who might want to get a hold of you, what might be the one way? I'll make sure I put it in the show notes too, but you can just which way might be the one way to get a hold of you?
Well, I regularly check LinkedIn. So I'm on LinkedIn. And then also my email, if anyone would just like to reach out more personally, is patrick.brady@efirstbank.com. So E like Echo, and then FirstBank all spelled out .com.
And I'll make sure that those will obviously be in the show notes as well, so check those out. So for anybody who's listening, if you really enjoyed this episode, don't forget to rate it on iTunes or wherever you listen. It's on 25 different platforms worldwide. And then write a review. But I think the other thing is to share this, because anyway, the more you do that and the more people listen, the more accessible the content becomes because of the algorithms out there in the world, right? So do that, because it would be really helpful. I want to make sure people are getting the benefit of listening to all these great, warm and genuine conversations. But thank you for listening to the Leadership with Heart podcast. You can grab the show notes by visiting customerfanatics.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter.